The first drop is always the most patient. Before it falls, it waits, suspended in the breathless space between cloud and earth, a fragment of sky learning the gravity of becoming. It trembles, weightless and unsure, as though deciding whether to fall at all. Around it, countless others shimmer in the cold silence of the upper air, each a mirror of sunlight, each a seed of motion. In that single descent begins everything that will one day be called a river. The fall is gentle, almost imperceptible, yet it marks the first surrender of vapor into form, dream into gravity, imagination into the pull of the world. As it lands, the droplet meets soil, moss, stone, its first touch of the terrestrial. The sound is too soft for any ear to catch, a secret moment when energy becomes flow. From 1,000 directions, other drops arrive, gathering into rivulets, tracing invisible paths down the slopes. They find each other not by chance but by law, obeying the shape of land carved long before their birth. And soon, what was once vapor becomes voice, a thread of sound weaving through rock and leaf, whispering of movement, of direction, of purpose. The first current is timid, clinging to shadows, but it already knows its truth: to move is to exist. Science tells us that such beginnings are inevitable. Heat lifts water from ocean to sky, cold gathers it into clouds, and the imbalance of air releases it again as rain. It is a cycle without a starting point, a story that has always been mid-sentence. Yet when we imagine the first drop, we imagine the birth of continuity itself, a small act of gravity that turns the abstract into the visible. Every river is therefore not born once, but endlessly reborn, every rainfall a reminder that even motion requires pause, even return begins with letting go. Ancient myths understood this without diagrams. In Sumer, the first waters were called the tears of the heavens. In Vedic hymns, rivers were goddesses descending to heal the earth. To the Greeks, Oceanus was both father and border, encircling the known world. Across civilizations, water was the first consciousness, something that remembered without words, that moved with intention but no mind. These myths, though clothed in poetry, contain an early intuition of what science later confirmed: that water is a carrier of pattern, that within every molecule is a record of vibration, heat, and exchange. The drop that falls today holds traces of stars that burned long before the earth cooled. The first drop, then, is not a beginning but a continuation. It carries within it the breath of comets, the minerals of vanished seas, the memory of ancient rains that fell on continents now lost. When it strikes the earth, it awakens not just motion but remembrance. It begins to gather stories, dust, pollen, fragments of life, and folds them into its clear body. As it moves, it writes them into the landscape, carving messages that only time can read. In this way, the first drop becomes the first sentence in an unending book, its ink transparent yet indelible. To imagine the first drop is also to imagine consciousness itself emerging from stillness. The human mind, too, begins in suspension, in the womb of silence, in the cloud of potential thought, before falling into awareness. The same gravity that guides water downward pulls our thoughts toward meaning, our lives toward motion. We flow through experiences, collecting, eroding, shaping, and remembering, always searching for the ocean that waits unseen. The story of the river is the story of becoming, a reminder that existence is less about reaching and more about returning, less about the destination and more about the surrender that allows flow to begin. So the first drop falls, quietly, unseen, its journey unnoticed by the vastness of the sky. But within its descent lies the entire logic of the universe: transformation, connection, return. It is the small gesture by which infinity becomes tangible, by which the formless becomes form. And as it joins its brothers in the thin silver line of the first stream, something miraculous occurs. The earth begins to remember movement. The planet itself starts to dream in liquid language, whispering a single idea to itself over and over: everything that flows must one day return. High in the lonely silence of the mountains, where air thins and sound becomes a kind of music too soft for human ears, the river begins its secret life. There, among stone and sky, the first threads of water are born from the patience of ice. What appears eternal, the frozen glacier, the still white field of snow, is not still at all. It breathes in the rhythm of seasons, melting by day, hardening by night, shifting imperceptibly beneath its own weight. Within that slow pulse, the mountain whispers its memory into water. Each drop that escapes from melting ice carries with it the taste of minerals, the cold breath of ancient winters, and the memory of a world much older than the one below. The mountain is the river's first teacher. Its slopes shape the young current, guiding its path through valleys and fissures, teaching it how to move by resistance. Every crack and ridge is an instruction written in stone. The river learns to turn, to twist, to find the easiest way forward not through force but through yielding. Science describes this dance as erosion, rock ground down by friction, carried away grain by grain, but to the mind that listens, it feels like conversation. The water asks, the mountain answers. Over time, they understand each other. The mountain gives shape, the river gives motion. Together, they create a geography of time. To study these beginnings is to step into deep time. Mountains are archives written in the language of uplift and collapse, of volcanic fire and glacial patience. The Himalayas, the Andes, the Alps, all were once ocean beds, lifted skyward by the slow violence of tectonic will. When a drop of water slides across their surface, it is touching the bones of the Earth's memory. Each grain of granite it carries holds a billion years of compression, each crystal a record of heat and pressure. And yet, despite this vastness, the mountain allows itself to be worn away by something as soft as water. This paradox, strength yielding to gentleness, is one of nature's most exquisite truths. The unyielding becomes shaped by the patient. The eternal learns impermanence from the fleeting. In the stillness of high altitudes, the river is fragile. It is not yet a body but a breath, a thread of motion finding its way through rock and root. Around it, life clings to the edges. Lichens, mosses, alpine flowers whose roots drink from the newborn stream. The cold water carries oxygen and minerals down the slope, a liquid promise to the valleys below. Every drop that escapes the glacier begins a journey that will feed forests, animals, and people. It is the quiet generosity of height, the mountain giving away pieces of itself to sustain what it will never see. The ancient peoples who lived in these high places often treated mountains as gods, and rivers as their voices. In the Andes, the Quechua believed the apis, the mountain spirits, breathed through snowmelt to give life to valleys. In Tibet, the Himalayas were considered the abode of deities, their melting ice the blessing of purity. Even today, pilgrims carry water from sacred springs as a symbol of divine origin, believing it holds the power to cleanse the heart and remember truth. Though mythic in tone, these stories carry a quiet recognition of something scientific, that all vitality below depends on the patience of the frozen above. The mountain is the invisible heart that pumps water, not with veins and muscle, but with sunlight and altitude. To descend from the mountain is to move from clarity into complexity. At the source, water is almost pure, clear, cold, untouched. But as it flows downward, it gathers the world into itself: soil, minerals, roots, insects, fallen leaves. It becomes richer, heavier, more alive. The river learns the art of carrying. In each turn, it becomes less of the mountain and more of everything else. This transformation mirrors the growth of consciousness itself. Our earliest thoughts, simple, crystalline, unformed, are like the water at the summit. As we move through life, we gather sediment, experience, emotion, memory. We too become rivers that carry both clarity and complexity within the same flow. The mountain does not mourn what it loses. It gives freely to the river, knowing that erosion is another word for participation. The particles of stone carried downstream will one day form new land, new deltas, new beginnings. In this way, nothing is truly lost, only transformed. The same law that guides the water guides all things that live and die, to give of oneself so that motion continues. The mountain's whisper, then, is not a lament but a benediction. It says, "Go. Remember where you came from, but do not stay. Find the valley, the sea, the cycle that waits beyond." As the young river leaves the highlands, mist rises behind it, curling like memory returning to the sky. The air smells of stone and pine, of minerals and cold. The mountain stands still, but within its silence there is movement, the slow melting of ice, the steady pull of gravity, the quiet continuation of beginnings. From this sacred exchange between height and flow, the world below will be fed for centuries. The river carries the essence of its source in every molecule, even as it forgets the shape of the glacier that gave it birth. The mountain's whisper lingers, faint but eternal. All motion begins in stillness, and all stillness dreams of motion. In the end, the mountain remains what it has always been, both guardian and memory. The river will travel far, changing landscapes and civilizations, but it will never escape the laws it learned in those first frozen breaths: to move, to yield, to carry, to return. The mountain's whisper will echo in every curve of its body, every shimmer of its surface. And if the river ever tries to remember its source, it will not need to climb back up. It will only need to listen, to the sound of gravity, to the rhythm of descent, to the silence beneath its own current. Because there, hidden in motion, the mountain still speaks. Gravity is not a force we see, yet we live inside its pull every moment of our lives. It is the quiet architect of motion, the invisible hand that guides rivers down mountains, moons around planets, and stars around the hearts of galaxies. In the story of the river, gravity is not simply a law of physics, it is the first desire. It is longing given direction. From the moment the droplet leaves the cloud, it is answering a call older than time itself. It falls because it must, but also because falling is its way of returning, to the earth, to unity, to stillness. In the long geometry of the universe, gravity is the poetry of attraction, and the river is its most tender verse. The earth's gravity is gentle but relentless. At the river's source, it coaxes water from melting ice, drawing each molecule toward lower ground. It is a soft persuasion, not a command. Every drop obeys not because it is forced, but because movement toward the center feels like truth. The water yields to this persuasion with trust, learning to flow, to bend, to follow curves instead of fighting them. Science tells us that gravity is the curvature of space-time, that mass bends the fabric of reality and draws other matter toward it. But within that cold equation lies something almost spiritual, a reminder that connection itself has a pull. Every being, every atom, every star yearns toward something else, not through violence, but through attraction. As the young river begins its descent, it discovers that gravity is not only downward. It is also inward. Each ripple, each eddy, each spiral forms because gravity interacts with friction, momentum, and resistance. What we see as the surface of water is really a map of invisible forces in conversation. The river does not rush blindly downhill, it dances. It learns to curve around stones, to slow in deep pools, to leap in cascades. Every motion is a balance of surrender and control, of giving in to gravity while shaping its course. This is how the universe itself moves, never in straight lines, always in spirals and arcs, patterns of falling that never end in destruction but in rhythm. In physics, the energy that gravity grants the river becomes kinetic, motion that grows stronger as it falls. Each meter of descent gathers potential, turning stillness into speed. This transformation is the river's heartbeat. But there is a deeper reflection here. Even in falling, there is creation. The same descent that might seem like loss is actually the beginning of life downstream. Gravity turns height into harvest, ice into nourishment, separation into reunion. What looks like decline is, in truth, fulfillment. The pull toward the sea is not death but completion, the river's way of becoming whole. Human beings, too, live under the soft tyranny of gravity, yet we rarely think of its poetry. It holds us to the earth, shapes our blood's movement, guides the tides that rock us in sleep. It keeps our atmosphere close, our oceans steady, our breath from drifting into the cold of space. Without gravity, there would be no direction, no sense of up or down, no river, no life. The same invisible hand that pulls the river to the ocean pulls the heart toward meaning. Every longing, every search for connection, every act of love is a human echo of the same cosmic principle, the wish to be drawn toward something larger than oneself. As the river gathers speed, gravity gives it voice. The quiet trickle becomes murmur, then laughter, then roar. The sound of the current is the sound of energy released, the sound of falling turned into song. The faster it flows, the more it erodes the path beneath it, carving a language into stone. Over centuries, valleys form, canyons open, and landscapes shift, all because gravity whispered and water listened. It is humbling to realize that some of the world's greatest wonders, the Grand Canyon, the Amazon Basin, the Rhine Valley, are the handwriting of gravity itself, written slowly by the ink of water. Ancient philosophers sensed this mystery long before modern science could name it. They imagined unseen forces that bound the heavens to the earth, that made the stars wheel in eternal rhythm. Aristotle called it the unnatural place toward which all things fall. Later mystics saw in it the divine order of creation, the pull of being toward unity. Gravity, in that sense, is not just physical but existential. It is the ache to return, the yearning for equilibrium that lives inside every particle of matter. The river's descent is a mirror of the soul's descent into experience, and its return to the sea mirrors the return of consciousness to silence. But gravity is not all pull and surrender. it creates resistance too. The faster the river falls, the more turbulence it creates, the more it shapes and is shaped by the terrain. In this tension, life appears. The spray that catches sunlight and births rainbows, the deep pools where fish gather, the eddies where silt settles, all are born from gravity's push and pull. Without resistance, there would be no depth, no pattern, no song. The beauty of flow exists only because gravity is never allowed to win completely. The river must yield enough to move, but resist enough to live. In this balance lies a quiet wisdom. To move is to trust in the unseen, to fall is to find one's path. The river never questions where it is going because gravity has already written the way. Yet even as it descends, it never truly loses itself. Every drop that falls carries the memory of the mountain's whisper, the shape of the land, the rhythm of its own flow. The journey downward becomes a meditation, a repetition of surrender that teaches strength through softness. Gravity may be the law, but water makes it art. By the time the river reaches the foothills, gravity has given it identity. It is no longer a nameless thread of melting ice. It has become momentum itself. Its voice deepens, its color darkens with minerals, its current gathers the scent of pine and soil. It moves not just because of the pull beneath it, but because of the memory behind it. Gravity has turned potential into presence, and the river, in its endless descent, becomes the world's reminder that to fall is not to fail. It is to fulfill the ancient promise of return. The river, now stronger, begins to meet the unyielding truth of the world, stone. Until this moment, its journey has been soft, all surrender and glide. But here, in the company of rock and canyon, it discovers resistance. The mountains that once guided it now challenge its passage, standing in silent defiance. The current strikes against their bodies, foams, fractures, and reforms, learning that even flow must confront what refuses to move. This encounter is not a battle but a conversation. Stone speaks in stillness, water answers in motion. Together, they compose the oldest dialogue on Earth, the exchange between what yields and what endures. Erosion begins not as destruction but as intimacy. The water traces every contour, every fault line, every secret weakness in the rock. It touches the same place for centuries until the hardness softens, until the mountain relents, grain by grain. Science calls this process weathering, the gradual wearing away of stone by friction, chemical reaction, and time. But to the poetic mind, it is more like memory, the slow shaping of identity by repeated contact. Just as life carves grooves in the mind, the river carves canyons in the earth. Each drop that passes leaves behind a tiny signature, invisible in a day, miraculous in 1,000 years. To understand erosion is to understand patience. The Colorado River has been cutting its canyon for over 5 million years. The Nile has wandered across deserts for twice that span. These rivers are not destroyers but sculptors, revealing the hidden bones of the planet. They do not force the land to obey, they persuade it through persistence. There is wisdom in that, a lesson for every life that meets resistance. The river teaches that nothing needs to be conquered, only touched long enough to be changed. The stone, in turn, teaches that to endure is not to oppose but to remain faithful to one's form until time itself remakes it. Within every bend and gorge, the river carries evidence of this exchange. Sediment drifts downstream, fine grains of once mighty mountains, now dissolved into motion. These particles become the memory of the land in liquid form. To geologists, they tell stories of mineral composition, climate, and age. To philosophers, they are metaphors for experience itself, pieces of the past carried forward into the present, transforming what lies ahead. The water remembers without knowing it remembers. Every swirl of silt, every shimmer of suspended dust, is a small act of remembrance, the earth writing its autobiography in the language of flow. In the depths of the current, where sunlight cannot reach, the water grows heavy and cold. Stones roll slowly along the bottom, knocking against one another like thoughts turning in the dark. Over millennia, they become smooth, edges worn down by patience. What was once jagged becomes gentle. The sound of this invisible tumbling is like a heartbeat beneath the surface, a rhythm of friction and grace. It tells us that time, not force, is the true artist of transformation. Just as human memory softens the sharpness of pain, the river softens the brutality of stone. There is a paradox in this meeting of elements. The most yielding substance on earth shapes the hardest. Lao Tzu once wrote, "Nothing is softer than water, yet nothing can resist it." The river proves this truth every moment it moves. Its strength is not in its speed or volume, but in its persistence, the willingness to continue even when opposed. Over time, it learns the landscape's language, following its curves, exploiting its fractures, honoring its forms. The river becomes a sculptor guided by listening. Its motion is patient intelligence, its path a meditation carved in silence. From a scientific lens, erosion is the planet's slow conversation with entropy. Rain, wind, and current all conspire to return mountains to dust, carrying their remains to the sea. Yet this loss is also the foundation of renewal. The minerals swept away from cliffs will one day nourish coral reefs, feed plankton blooms, and build new land. The matter of mountains becomes the food of oceans. In this eternal exchange, destruction and creation are indistinguishable. The same friction that grinds away the old world gives birth to the new. In this way, the river's erosion mirrors the great cycles of the universe, stars collapsing into dust, dust igniting into stars again. Human memory, too, erodes in this fashion. The edges of our experiences are worn down by time, leaving behind smoothed impressions. The details fade, but the shape remains. Just as a canyon remembers the river that formed it long after the water has gone, we are shaped by forces we no longer recall. Our minds bear the grooves of past loves, losses, joys, and awakenings. The years that wear us down also reveal us, exposing the inner layers we did not know were there. The body may age, but in that erosion lies the unveiling of truth, the quiet strength that comes from being touched by time. When night falls along the river's carved banks, the sound of water becomes a kind of prayer. The air carries the scent of wet stone, the promise of continuity. Above, stars shimmer like flecks of quartz embedded in darkness, their light reflecting faintly on the surface. The same laws that draw galaxies together draw the river forward. The same slow patience that forms worlds forms canyons. Everything is part of one continuous act of remembering. The stone remembers the glacier, the river remembers the rain, the night remembers the sun. The whole earth is a living archive of its own transformations. As the river flows onward, it carries both what it has worn away and what it has learned. It no longer moves only through the world. It moves through history, through memory, through the delicate fabric of time itself. The mountain that once stood unbroken is now present in the river's body, dissolved but not destroyed. The lesson of erosion, like the lesson of living, is that nothing truly vanishes. It simply changes form. The river will continue to shape the land long after our species forgets its own name, and in that endless work, it teaches the deepest truth of all, that every act of resistance eventually becomes part of the flow. The river descends into green country now, a realm of roots, wings, and voices. After the silence of stone, it finds itself surrounded by life that listens. Trees lean toward its murmuring, their leaves trembling as though the current speaks directly to them. The forest, in its vast stillness, is not merely a backdrop but a participant. Every fern, every moss, every root reaching through soil has a relationship with the river. Here, the water is no longer alone in motion. It becomes communion. The forest and the river are bound in an unspoken pact. The river gives life, and in return, the forest shelters its path from the sun. Together, they form an ancient rhythm of exchange, one that breathes for the entire world. The river carries more than minerals now, it carries breath. As it winds through the woodland floor, it seeps into the soil, feeding invisible veins of moisture that sustain roots deep underground. In this quiet transaction, physics becomes tenderness. Water dissolves nutrients from the rock and gifts them to the trees. In return, the trees steady the river's banks, preventing the soil from being swept away. Without this balance, the river would tear its own bed apart. It is a partnership older than human memory, written not in words but in cycles. The water flows outward, the roots flow inward. Life persists between them in perpetual conversation. Scientifically, this communion is a masterpiece of coevolution. Forests regulate humidity and temperature, pulling water into the air through transpiration. The vapor rises, cools, and falls again as rain, often returning to the same river valley that birthed it. In the Amazon, it is said that a single tree can send hundreds of gallons of water skyward in a single day. The forest makes its own weather. It is both the child and the parent of the river. In ecological terms, this is called a feedback loop, but to the poetic mind, it is a form of remembering, the land giving back to the water what the water first gave to the land. In the filtered light beneath the canopy, the river slows. Sunbeams fall in fragments across its surface, catching leaves that drift like thoughts half remembered. Frogs sing, insects hum, and birds flash across the current, their wings brushing the air in bright, brief signatures. Life gathers where water gathers. The oxygen within the river feeds fish and microorganisms, and their presence feeds the forest in turn. Fallen leaves decompose in the shallows, returning carbon and nutrients to the water. Nothing here is wasted, everything is transformed. The cycle is not merely survival, it is art. Each life form adds a line to the poem of motion, each death becomes another verse. Ancient cultures sensed the holiness of this bond. In many mythologies, rivers were seen as divine messengers connecting earth and sky, while forests were the temples that protected their sacred flow. The Ganges was said to descend from the heavens, carried by trees and mountains that softened her fall. In Celtic lore, every stream was guarded by a spirit of wood or moss. Even today, when science replaces myth, the reverence remains. People still speak in whispers beside forest rivers, as if afraid to interrupt something older and wiser than themselves. The quiet beneath the trees is not empty, it is filled with listening. From a biological perspective, forests and rivers sustain each other through intricate chemistry. Tree roots filter toxins, trapping sediment before it can cloud the water. In return, the river's moisture cools the forest floor and prevents drought. Amphibians breed in the shallow edges, birds nest in the reeds, and mammals follow the current for miles, drawn by the promise of water. The forest listens to the river through its roots, the river listens to the forest through its reflection. Together, they form a living system of perception, an ecosystem that senses, adapts, and remembers. The river is transformed here. Its voice, once sharp and restless in the mountains, becomes slow and melodic. It speaks in ripples rather than roars, in reflections rather than collisions. In its still pools, one can see the sky divided by branches, clouds gliding between leaves. To look into such water is to glimpse the unity of opposites, the sky contained within the earth, motion contained within calm. The river is no longer only a traveler, it is a mirror, a mind, a living archive of light. The forest gazes into it, seeing itself endlessly reflected. At dusk, when the air cools and mist begins to rise, the boundary between river and forest dissolves completely. The fog drifts upward like the river's breath returning to the canopy. Insects chorus their twilight songs, and somewhere deeper in the woods, an owl calls, a sound as ancient as gravity itself. The night transforms the forest into a breathing organism, and the river into its bloodstream. Through every root and ripple, the world inhales and exhales, maintaining a fragile equilibrium that sustains all who live within it. There is a lesson in this quiet interdependence. We too are rivers moving through forests of connection. The air we breathe has passed through leaves, the water we drink has touched stone older than our species. Each heartbeat echoes the rhythm of current and wind, each breath participates in the same exchange that binds forest to stream. To live is not to stand apart from nature, but to flow within it, to give and to take, to nourish and to be nourished. The forest teaches balance, the river teaches trust. Together, they remind us that harmony is not stillness but reciprocity. When morning comes and light returns, dew clings to every blade of grass, every spider's web stretched between roots. These tiny droplets are the forest's way of remembering the river's generosity. The cycle continues. Rain will fall, leaves will drop, roots will drink, and the river will rise again. What began as a single drop of melted snow now feeds entire worlds of green and breath. The forest listens, and the river speaks, and in that endless exchange, life itself finds its voice. The river, having passed through the hush of forests, now enters a land of open silence. The trees thin, the air dries, and light becomes sharper, more absolute. The soil here is pale and fractured, littered with stones that gleam like the remnants of forgotten time. Wind replaces birdsong, and the river's sound is no longer a melody, it is an echo. Its body grows slender, shimmering under the fierce sun, winding between skeletal grasses and the ribs of old mountains that have collapsed into dust. This is the desert, a place where water dreams of itself. Yet even here, the river endures, tracing the memory of movement across a land that has almost forgotten how to receive it. To the casual eye, the desert may seem lifeless. But beneath its quiet, there exists an entire world in waiting. Seeds sleep beneath the surface, wrapped in patience, enduring years of drought for a single day of rain. Insects lie buried in pockets of sand, their bodies suspended between moments of activity and stillness. Even the stones hold water in microscopic pores, locked within their mineral hearts. The river is not just a traveler, it is an awakener. When it passes through this austere kingdom, the world stirs. Dry roots swell, colors rise like whispers, and flowers bloom so briefly that they seem to be dreams taking physical form. From a scientific view, deserts are living paradoxes, harsh yet delicate, barren yet overflowing with adaptation. The few drops that fall here must be treasured, stored, recycled. Plants like the creosote and saguaro have mastered the art of scarcity. They drink deeply when the river floods, storing water in tissues and roots, then close themselves off from the world, waiting. The river, though often seasonal in such lands, writes a pattern into the soil that dictates every form of survival. Its presence, however brief, reshapes everything it touches. Even after it dries, the memory remains, a faint line of darker sand, a trace of life's handwriting across the desert's endless page. The ancient people who lived beside such transient rivers saw them as holy. To them, water was not merely sustenance but revelation. Many built their civilizations around seasonal floods, the Egyptians along the Nile, the Sumerians beside the Tigris and Euphrates, the Indus people where monsoons briefly brought the desert to life. They learned to predict, to channel, to revere. The river's rhythm became the pulse of their calendars and gods. Even in the harshest environments, humanity survived because it listened, to the soil, to the wind, to the faint promise of water beneath the earth. The river taught us that persistence is not about abundance, but about wisdom. There is something profoundly spiritual about scarcity. When water is rare, every drop becomes sacred. The desert teaches humility, a reminder that life does not demand excess. It asks only for balance. From a psychological lens, deserts often evoke introspection, the stripping away of noise and need. Mystics and philosophers have long sought solitude in such landscapes, sensing that in their emptiness lies a mirror for the mind. The river, moving through this emptiness, becomes a teacher of restraint. It does not rush, it survives by adapting its shape to what the land allows. Its voice grows quiet, but its presence deepens. Geologically, deserts are memory keepers. The lack of rain preserves rather than erodes. Fossils, bones, and even ancient riverbeds remain intact for millennia. Beneath the dunes lie the imprints of rivers long vanished, pale channels etched in rock, marking where water once breathed. Satellite images of the Sahara reveal ghost rivers, some hundreds of kilometers long, that once flowed through green valleys now turn to dust. The desert remembers even when it appears to forget. It holds the absence of water as a kind of sacred archive, proof that flow and stillness are merely phases of the same eternal cycle. At dusk, when the heat finally loosens its grip, the desert transforms. The river reflects a sky turned molten gold, then violet, then black. Stars appear, millions of them, bright enough to cast faint shadows across the sand. The air cools and the world exhales. The river becomes a ribbon of reflected cosmos, winding through the bones of the earth. Here, one understands how silence can be vast yet full, how emptiness can hold everything. The desert's quiet does not signify death, it is the sound of existence stripped to its essence. Even where it fades underground, the river does not vanish. It seeps through layers of gravel and salt, forming unseen aquifers that sustain oases miles away. Palms and reeds will grow where no visible water runs, fed by the invisible thread that continues beneath. This hidden persistence mirrors the quiet endurance within all living things, the unseen will to keep flowing, to keep remembering the source even when the surface offers no proof. In that sense, the river spirit is never truly lost. It simply learns to move differently, to speak through stillness. By dawn, the first light spills across the dunes. The sand glows like embers, and somewhere far ahead, the river widens again, catching the sun in a single gleaming curve. The desert fades behind it, leaving the air full of memory. The river has survived yet another silence. In its endurance lies a lesson for all who wander through dry seasons of their own, that even in absence, movement continues, that even in stillness, something flows. The desert does not extinguish the river, it refines it, distills its essence until only truth remains. To exist, one must remember how to keep going. The river enters a place of vast plains now, a gentle land where horizons stretch endlessly, where grasses sway like slow waves under the touch of wind. After the austerity of the desert, this openness feels like a breath released. The water spreads wider, calmer, softer. It no longer carves through rock or hides beneath sand. It drifts, meandering through fields of motion and color. This is the plain, where the river forgets struggle and learns grace. Its course curves loosely across the earth, tracing paths of abundance and patience. Here, the river is no longer a survivor, it is a giver, a quiet architect of life. The plain is a place built on surrender. Nothing here resists the sky. The land lies flat and unguarded, welcoming every cloud, every wind, every drop. The river, too, adopts this humility. It flows without ambition, yet everything it touches thrives. Grasses root deep into its banks, their green fingers reaching for moisture. Birds nest among the reeds, their songs rising with the morning mist. Herds of animals wander to drink, leaving mirrored footprints that vanish with the sun. The river moves slowly enough to reflect it all: the sky, the beasts, the movement of time itself. In the stillness of these waters, the world seems to pause and see itself. Scientifically, this stage marks a river's maturity. Having descended from mountains and crossed through forests and deserts, it now finds equilibrium. The slope of the land lessens, velocity slows, sediment settles. What the river once tore from the mountains it now lays down as soil, rich, dark, fertile. This process, called deposition, is nature's way of creating life from loss. Every flood leaves behind new layers of nourishment, feeding crops, forests, and civilizations. The plains are the river's offering, a gift made from everything it has carried, worn down, and transformed. The story of erosion becomes the story of creation. Humanity has always gathered here, drawn by this generosity. The plains of the Nile, the Ganges, the Mississippi, all are cradles of civilization. We built our earliest homes beside such rivers, learned to sow seeds, and measured seasons by the rhythm of the flood. The river's patience became our calendar, its generosity, our survival. Villages turned to cities, and cities to empires, all dependent on the silent constancy of this flowing presence. Even as technology advanced and walls rose high, we remained bound to its pulse. Every loaf of bread, every harvest, every breath of grass is still, at its core, a river's memory made tangible. Yet this abundance comes with fragility. The same floods that nourish can destroy. The same calmness that invites can betray. The river, in its gentleness, reminds us that stability is never permanent. It is a momentary harmony between chaos and calm. Hydrologists describe this as dynamic equilibrium, the balance between erosion and deposition, between movement and rest. The river is never truly still, even when it appears tranquil. Beneath its surface, currents twist and spiral, carrying silt, oxygen, and microscopic life. Its calmness is not the absence of motion. It is motion refined, disciplined by time. From a philosophical lens, the plains teach a form of wisdom found only through surrender. Here, everything is vast yet measured, moving but never hurried. The horizon stretches endlessly, reminding one of eternity's quiet pace. There are no boundaries, no walls, no sharp divisions between land and sky. The world feels infinite, yet intimate. This is the part of the river's journey that mirrors middle life, the time when one learns to flow not with force, but with faith. The river no longer seeks to prove its strength, it simply becomes what it was meant to be. In its calmness lies the realization that endurance is not defiance, but acceptance. Ecologically, floodplains are among the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth. As the river overflows, it deposits layers of nutrient-rich silt that sustain plants, insects, and mammals. Each flood renews the landscape, keeping it alive. Fish migrate upstream to spawn. Migratory birds return season after season to nest in the wetlands. It is a living pulse, a reminder that destruction and renewal are two sides of one motion. When humans interfere too rigidly, when we dam and redirect, we interrupt this sacred rhythm. Flood control may save a city but silence a valley. The river's wisdom lies in its cycles. Our challenge is to listen without fear. At dusk, when the last light slides across the water, the plains glow in shades of amber and silver. The river seems motionless, yet its reflection ripples with the slightest breath of wind. Fireflies rise from the grasses like sparks of memory, and frogs call softly from the reeds. The world feels suspended between two eternities, day fading into night, motion blending into stillness. It is in these moments that the river becomes a mirror for the human spirit, outwardly calm, inwardly infinite. The sound of its movement is like breathing, like time itself inhaling and exhaling in rhythm with the stars. In the stillness of the plain, one understands how memory travels. Every grain of sediment here once belonged to another place: mountain, forest, desert. The river has carried them all, and now it releases them gently into the open world. It is the act of letting go, of giving without demand. Perhaps this is what remembrance truly means, not to hold on, but to return what was given, transformed. The river, in its endless patience, becomes the embodiment of forgiveness. It forgives the stones that resisted it, the droughts that nearly ended it, even the deserts that swallowed its flow. It moves forward, carrying only the essence of what remains, life itself. When morning comes, mist hangs low over the plains, and the river glides beneath it like a dream between worlds. The wind stirs, lifting the fog to reveal fields stretching to the horizon, gleaming with dew. The river continues, quiet and unhurried, its surface reflecting the awakening sky. It does not look back. In this vast openness, it has found peace not through reaching its end, but through becoming part of everything it touches. The plains have taught it to flow without fear, to remember without clinging, to give without losing. It moves on, bearing the memory of stillness toward the waiting sea. The river drifts now toward the wetlands, a threshold between solid ground and open water, where land begins to dissolve into its reflection. Here, the world feels half awake, half dreaming. Mist hovers above the shallows, reeds rise like thin green candles, and birds move as though suspended between earth and sky. This is not a place of clear boundaries. Everything blends, merges, and transforms. The river slows further, spreading into 1,000 channels that weave through fields of water lilies and sedge. It is as if the river, nearing the culmination of its journey, begins to forget what it once was and becomes something wider, softer, more mysterious. Wetlands are nature's liminal spaces, alive with both birth and decay. Every scent carries the memory of life returning to the soil. Beneath the still surface, an intricate system of roots and microbes breathes in slow rhythm, filtering and purifying. What appears stagnant is secretly busy, teeming with invisible motion. The water here is neither young nor old. It is in transition, holding the nutrients of forests and mountains, carrying them toward the sea. The river is no longer a traveler seeking destination. It is a caretaker preparing the earth for renewal. From a scientific perspective, wetlands are among the most essential ecosystems on the planet. They act as natural kidneys of the earth, absorbing floodwaters, trapping sediments, and filtering toxins. Without them, rivers would choke and seas would cloud. Peatlands, marshes, and deltas store immense amounts of carbon, slowing the warming of the atmosphere. Every cattail and reed, every microscopic organism living in the mud, performs a function that sustains life beyond its boundaries. The river, by giving itself to the wetlands, ensures the continuity of balance. It teaches that even in stillness, there is work, even in decay, there is creation. The sounds of the wetlands are unlike any other part of the river's journey. The air hums with insect wings, the calls of frogs echo like tiny bells, and birds move in rhythmic unison, their wings stirring reflections. The river's voice here is hushed, diffused across channels and pools. Its once clear current becomes a tapestry of whispers, a conversation between water, plant, and air. At dawn, the light drifts across the mist, scattering into thousands of tiny suns trembling upon the surface. The world feels newly made, each droplet carrying the glow of creation. In mythology, wetlands were often seen as sacred gates between worlds, places where the living and the dead, the seen and unseen, could meet. In Celtic and Norse legends, they were portals guarded by spirits of mist and root. In African and Asian traditions, they were wombs of fertility, the breath of gods upon the land. The symbolism is not misplaced. To stand in a marsh is to feel the planet exhale, to sense time moving slower, as if even the earth must pause to remember itself. The river, dissolving here, becomes something closer to spirit, less a body of water than an awareness of connection. Biologically, wetlands represent the art of balance through adaptation. Life here thrives in contradiction. Where water suffocates soil, plants evolve to breathe through their stems. Where decay abounds, new organisms find sustenance. It is a constant conversation between resistance and acceptance. The river learns this language too. It no longer fights to move forward. Instead, it disperses, trusting that its many paths will still lead to the sea. It becomes less concerned with identity and more with belonging. In this surrender lies wisdom, that sometimes to continue, one must dissolve into many forms. At night, the wetlands transform into a mirror of stars. The sky and water become indistinguishable. Fireflies drift above the reeds, echoing constellations in motion. The air is cool and fragrant with the scent of damp earth and life renewing itself. The river, scattered across pools and channels, reflects the cosmos as if remembering its first element. This place, caught between creation and completion, feels like the memory of the universe itself, calm, ancient, unhurried. The distinction between river and world disappears. There is only flow. In the quietest hours before dawn, a thin mist clings to the surface. Every reed glistens with dew, every ripple gleams faintly blue in the first light. The wetlands, half land and half water, symbolize a truth often forgotten, that permanence is an illusion. Everything that seems fixed is only waiting to become something else. The river's identity, once so clear, has become vast. Its essence now fills not a single path, but an entire landscape of breath and reflection. It remembers not through direction, but through presence. Philosophically, this stage of the journey mirrors the human transition between self and surrender. The river, like consciousness, expands beyond form, rediscovering unity through dispersion. It teaches that identity is not lost when we give ourselves to something larger. It is fulfilled. Just as each droplet remains part of the river even when it separates, so too does every life contribute to the collective flow of existence. What the river teaches here is humility, that to dissolve is not to end, but to return to belonging. As the morning sun climbs, mist fades, revealing the wetlands in full bloom, herons poised in silver light, dragonflies gliding across mirrored pools, lilies opening like slow thoughts. The river moves among them, no longer rushing or seeking, but simply existing in grace. This is not the end of its journey, but its preparation for becoming infinite. Soon it will meet the sea, that vast embodiment of return. But for now, in the hush of the wetlands, it pauses, calm, weightless, complete. Here, the river does not just flow, it breathes. The river has reached the delta now, a vast and intricate labyrinth of channels spreading outward like veins from a great heart. Here, the river's voice is no longer singular. It divides, softens, and disperses into countless threads, each carrying fragments of its long memory toward the sea. The land flattens completely, the horizon dissolves, and the air carries the scent of salt. The delta is not an ending but a revelation, a place where the river begins to remember its purpose. For so long, it has carved, carried, and sustained. Now, it prepares to give itself entirely away. The delta is a masterpiece of diffusion. From the air, it appears as a living network, green fingers of earth reaching into blue, channels interlaced with marsh and mangrove, each one pulsing with slow, deliberate motion. Here, fresh and salt water meet in a silent negotiation. The river brings nutrients, the sea brings minerals, and their mingling sustains one of the richest ecosystems on Earth. Mangroves stretch their roots into the brackish water, filtering salt through their leaves. Birds gather in multitudes, herons, flamingos, pelicans, drawn by the abundance of fish and life that flourish in this threshold between worlds. The delta is a breathing map of coexistence. From a scientific perspective, deltas represent the culmination of geological patience. They form when rivers lose energy, dropping the sediments they've carried across continents. Over millennia, these layers of silt build new land, fertile, fragile, and vital. The Nile Delta feeds millions. The Ganges Delta sustains entire civilizations. The Mississippi Delta anchors the wetlands of an entire coast. Yet deltas are also impermanent. Each one changes constantly, shaped by tides, storms, and rising seas. They teach the inevitability of transformation. What grows today will one day be washed away, and from that loss, new life will begin again. In the delta's stillness, one can feel both abundance and vulnerability intertwined. It is a place of constant giving and gradual disappearance. The land here exists in flux, never fully earth, never fully water. Every tide reshapes its edges, erasing one curve, creating another. This instability is not a flaw but a function, the natural rhythm of transition. To live within such motion requires acceptance, an understanding that nothing remains fixed. The delta embodies impermanence not as tragedy, but as beauty, the beauty of continuation, of letting go without resistance. At dusk, the sky mirrors the delta's complexity. Water glows in tones of gold, rose, and violet, merging seamlessly with the horizon. The river's surface reflects the last light like a memory being rewritten. Birds fly low across the channels, their wings catching the sun's fading warmth. The air hums softly with insects, and the distant roar of waves can be heard, a promise that the sea is near. The river feels lighter now, as though the burden of distance and gravity has finally lifted. Every droplet carries within it the knowledge of arrival. From an ecological standpoint, deltas are symbols of interconnectedness. The nutrients carried by the river feed plankton, which nourish fish, which feed birds and mammals in turn. The sediments build islands that shelter mangroves and reeds, which protect coastlines from storms. In the delta, every organism is both giver and receiver, every life form dependent on countless others. The balance is fragile, yet profoundly resilient. Even when floods come or tides rise, life finds a way to adapt, to shift, to continue. The river, in its final act, ensures that the cycle never ends. Humanity, too, has always been drawn to these places of convergence. Ancient cities flourished where rivers met the sea: Alexandria, New Orleans, Dhaka, Venice. Deltas offered abundance but demanded respect. Those who lived there learned to read the language of water, to accept its moods. They built stilted homes, floating markets, temples reflected in still lagoons. In their architecture and rituals, they mirrored the river's nature, flexible, enduring, always in motion. The delta became not just a home but a philosophy, a way of life shaped by the awareness that stability is temporary and belonging means surrendering to change. Philosophically, the delta represents the soul's preparation for dissolution. After the long journey through struggle, stillness, and renewal, the river begins to release its sense of individuality. It no longer insists on direction, it opens itself to the vastness ahead. To merge with the sea is to embrace unity, to relinquish the boundaries that once defined existence. The delta is the meditation before awakening, the last pause before merging with the infinite. The river does not mourn its ending, it expands beyond it. In this surrender lies a peace deeper than permanence. At night, the delta becomes a dreamscape. The tide rises, and moonlight scatters across the shallow waters, turning them to silver. The river and the sea exchange breaths, one flowing inward, one outward. The mangroves whisper in the wind, their roots half submerged in darkness. Everything seems to hover in balance, suspended between worlds. The air carries the faint taste of salt and silt, the mingling of memory and possibility. It is here that the river begins to remember its true nature, that it was never separate, never alone, always part of a greater flow that began long before mountains rose or rains first fell. By dawn, the horizon glows pale blue, and the first waves of the sea shimmer in the distance. The river's final channels stretch toward that light like open hands. There is no resistance, no fear. Every droplet moves with purpose, yet without urgency. The journey has come full circle. What began as a trickle of melting snow will soon dissolve into the vastness of the ocean, where it will evaporate, rise, and return again as rain. The delta is not the river's end, it is its transformation. In giving itself to the sea, the river fulfills the oldest truth of all, that nothing truly ends, everything only changes form. The sea accepts the river without hesitation. There is no clash, no storm of conquest, only a gradual merging, as if the river had always belonged here. The water darkens and deepens, the currents become vast and untraceable. The river's clear memory dissolves into the immense body of the ocean, every droplet losing its name but gaining infinity. In that quiet surrender, there is a profound peace. The river has completed its pilgrimage, carried silt and stories across the body of the earth, and now returns to the great origin from which all waters rise. What began as a whisper in the mountains ends as part of the world's great breathing. The joining is not an erasure but a transformation. The sea does not consume the river, it expands it. Every atom that once flowed through forests and valleys now travels the open expanse of tides, drifting beyond horizons. The molecules that once nourished reeds and fish now mingle with plankton and coral, beginning new lives in microscopic worlds. Science calls it the water cycle, but in truth, it is more like reincarnation. Nothing vanishes, everything becomes. The river's surrender is an act of creation, its end a beginning in disguise. From a physical perspective, the meeting of river and ocean forms a dynamic equilibrium. Freshwater and saltwater swirl together, creating gradients of density, temperature, and life. This mixing zone, called the estuarine boundary, is one of the most fertile regions on Earth. Tiny organisms thrive here, feeding entire chains of life that extend far into the open sea. The sediments carried by the river settle into the continental shelf, shaping coastlines and nurturing coral reefs. Even the river's minerals, dissolved long ago, will one day crystallize again in shells or stones, completing cycles that span centuries. In the vast logic of the ocean, Even dissolution serves a purpose. At the surface, waves move in endless rhythm, each one born from distant winds and gravitational pull. Beneath them, the river's essence disperses through layers of salinity and depth, becoming part of the ocean's memory. The sea holds all waters, the rain that fell 1,000 years ago, the tears of glaciers, the vapor that drifted across continents. To join it is to join eternity. For the river, this union is both destiny and deliverance. It has spent its life carving form into the formless, giving voice to gravity. Now, in the ocean, it returns to silence, not as absence but as completion. The moment of merging mirrors the human search for meaning. All our journeys, our efforts, our creations, our struggles, flow toward something larger, something beyond comprehension. We shape our paths through resistance, through terrain, through time. But in the end, the greatest peace comes not from holding on, but from letting go. Like the river, we discover that identity was never permanent. It was only a phase in the greater cycle of being. To merge with what is infinite, whether one calls it nature, truth, or consciousness, is to finally understand that the boundaries we fear losing were never real. At dawn, the horizon gleams with a soft gradient of gold and silver. The waves reflect the first light of the sun, and the air carries a faint sweetness. A mist rises from the surface, blurring the line between sea and sky. The water that once roared through mountains now hums with the rhythm of tides. It is no longer the river, yet not entirely the sea, somewhere in between, a whisper of both. In that in-between lies the truth of existence, that all forms are temporary, yet their essence eternal. The same molecules that flowed through a forest stream will one day rise as rain over distant lands. The cycle continues, endlessly patient, endlessly renewed. From a philosophical lens, this merging is the soul's return to the universal. Just as the river dissolves into the ocean, so does consciousness dissolve into the infinite field of being. Individuality, like the river's banks, was necessary for the journey but not for the destination. The ego resists dissolution, clings to shape and story. Yet when it finally releases itself, what remains is freedom, a vast stillness where all distinctions fade. In many spiritual traditions, this is enlightenment, not the gaining of something new, but the remembering of what was always there. The river does not die, it awakens into oneness. At night, the sea glows faintly under the moonlight. Bioluminescent plankton shimmer like scattered stars, echoing the galaxies above. The same patterns repeat, spirals, waves, cycles, each reflecting the other in a dance of symmetry. The ocean's surface becomes a mirror for the cosmos, and the boundary between water and sky vanishes completely. If one could listen closely, perhaps one would hear the heartbeat of the planet itself, a slow, unending pulse, rising and falling with the tide. Somewhere within that rhythm, the river's essence moves still, unseen but eternal, part of the great circulation that binds all life together. Human civilizations have always looked to this meeting of river and sea as a sacred place. Ancient poets wrote of it as the threshold between the known and the infinite. Sailors built shrines where fresh water met salt, praying for safe passage. Even today, people gather where rivers open into the sea, drawn by a quiet intuition that something transcendent happens here. It is a space of transition, where identity yields to continuity and the finite dissolves into the infinite. Standing there, one feels both small and infinite at once. The wind tastes of salt and distance, and the heart recognizes the pattern. It too flows toward something vast and unseen. As the day fades, the sea grows calm. The waves slow, the air softens, and the horizon melts into twilight. The river is gone, yet everywhere present. It lives now in mist, in rain, in cloud, its essence scattered across the sky. Soon, it will return to the mountains, fall again as snow, and begin its journey anew. The circle is unbroken. The lesson of the river is simple and eternal. What we release does not vanish, it transforms. Every ending is a form of continuation. The ocean is not the destination. It is the reminder that everything we are is already part of something endless, waiting only for our return. When the river dissolves into the ocean, it might seem that its story has ended, but endings in nature are only transformations wearing the mask of stillness. Deep within the ocean's vast body, far from shore and light, the water begins to move again, pulled by unseen hands of wind, temperature, and gravity. What was once a river now becomes current, drift, vapor, a silent reorganization of memory. In this darkness, life begins anew. Tiny organisms bloom in the nutrient-rich traces the river carried from the land, feeding fish that in turn nourish greater creatures. Even in surrender, the river continues to give. Its voice may be lost, but its influence travels endlessly. The ocean carries its rhythm across continents, shaping weather, sculpting clouds, sending whispers of rain toward distant lands. Above, the heat of the sun begins its patient work. The ocean surface warms and softens, and molecules of water, some that once brushed the stones of the riverbed, escape upward into the air. They rise weightless, shedding their salt and density, climbing toward the blue. Evaporation is the soul's ascent of the water cycle, the moment when the finite lifts into the infinite once again. To the eye, it is invisible. To time, it is eternal. The same drop that once fell on a mountain thousands of years ago may now rise again, lighter than thought, carried by the breath of the planet. It drifts upward until it cools, condensing into cloud, forming once more the gray architecture of potential rain. This, too, is memory in motion. The cloud remembers what it once was. It carries in its unseen chemistry the record of its journeys, the minerals, the isotopes, the faint trace of human industry, the scent of forests and fields it once passed through. Every vapor particle is a time capsule, holding the fingerprint of its travels. Scientists can read these memories through the ratios of oxygen isotopes or the patterns of dust trapped in ice cores. From these traces, we learn of climates long gone, of ancient rains that fell upon mammoths and ferns. Even when water becomes air, it continues to remember its story. In this way, the river's dissolution is not an erasure but an act of continuity, a quiet recycling of essence into form, form into essence. The same principles that govern the river's physical flow also shape the evolution of consciousness. What we call forgetting may only be transformation. What we call silence may only be a subtler form of song. The river's dream becomes vapor, and vapor becomes vision. The world itself breathes in rhythm with these transformations, its pulse synchronized with the rise and fall of water, the giving and taking of form. There is a quiet philosophy hidden in the water cycle, that existence depends not on possession, but on circulation. Nothing in nature clings to what it was. The river lets go of its banks, the ocean releases its vapor, the clouds surrender their rain. Through this constant exchange, life sustains itself. Humans, too, are part of this rhythm, though we often resist it. We build walls, create names, construct identities as if permanence were possible. Yet beneath these illusions, our lives move just as the river does, toward dissolution, transformation, and renewal. To live fully is to participate in that cycle without fear, to understand that release is not loss but continuation in another form. As the vapor ascends, the atmosphere becomes a bridge between earth and sky. Within its shifting veils, storms are born, seasons are balanced, and climates are shaped. The water that once brushed the roots of trees now floats above mountain peaks, forming halos around the sun. Lightning, thunder, and wind are the voices of its rebirth. And when the moment is right, when the temperature drops and the air grows heavy, the vapor gathers itself once more into droplets. They fall as rain, soft and inevitable, returning to the ground they once left. The cycle closes, but not in repetition, in renewal. Each descent is new, each drop a continuation of everything that has ever flowed. If one listens closely to the sound of rain, one can almost hear the river's voice returning. It speaks softly, through rhythm and rhythm alone, telling the story of its passage through air, ocean, and time. It carries no sorrow for what it lost, for it knows that loss is the shape of return. The rain nourishes soil, replenishes streams, awakens seeds that have slept for months in darkness. The world stirs again, and the river, reborn in 1,000 small forms, begins to move downhill, remembering its ancient path. The entire planet exhales in relief, and the balance of motion resumes. In the ancient texts of the Upanishads, it is written that the soul, too, moves in such cycles, rising, returning, forgetting, remembering. Enlightenment is not escape from the cycle but awareness within it. The river that becomes vapor and returns as rain teaches this truth in every drop, that death is not destruction, but dispersal, that to dissolve is to expand. The journey's grace lies in its willingness to continue, without asking for permanence. Each molecule of water that rises from the ocean carries within it a single purpose: to fall again, to give again, to begin again. And so the story circles back to its silent origin. Somewhere high above the earth, the vapor cools, condenses, and begins its descent. The first drop trembles once more at the edge of the cloud, poised between being and becoming. It hesitates, remembering the mountains, the stones, the sea. Then it falls, softly, beautifully, without fear. Its descent is both an ending and a promise, that all who flow will one day return, and all who return will one day flow again. When the rain falls once more upon the land, the river is reborn, but not as the same being it once was. The droplets scatter across hills, forests, and plains, each following its own unpredictable path. Some sink into the soil, feeding roots and awakening seeds that have waited in the dark. Others gather into trickles that will one day grow into brooks and streams. The world drinks deeply, and in that quiet act of absorption, memory becomes nourishment. The water that once traveled from mountain to sea now moves through veins of leaf and bark, through the pulse of animals, through the breath of the living. The river story is no longer a line. It is everywhere, diffused through life itself. A forest remembers rain differently than stone does. Trees hold it in their trunks, slowly releasing it through leaves into the misty air. Moss cushions its fall, soil swells with gratitude. The water becomes part of photosynthesis, part of breath, part of the green alchemy that sustains the planet. Every cell that drinks remembers the gift in silence. Within that stillness, life reawakens with a soft persistence. Insects emerge from hidden burrows. Birds clean their wings. Seeds swell, breaking their shells to reach for light. The earth hums again with the subtle electricity of becoming. Science calls this the hydrological balance, the system through which precipitation, infiltration, evaporation, and runoff maintain the rhythm of the planet. Yet to see it only as data is to miss the intimacy of the act. Rain is not just a phenomenon. It is communion. It is the return of the forgotten to the remembering world. Every drop carries both history and hope, the ashes of stars, the breath of ancient oceans, the whispers of clouds that drifted continents away. When it lands, it completes a thought begun long before humanity appeared, a sentence written by the earth itself. In the quiet after rain, when the air smells of renewal, one can almost sense the invisible motion beneath the soil. The droplets seep downward through layers of rock and sand, filling aquifers that lie deep below. There, they may rest for decades or centuries, untouched by light, dreaming in stillness. These hidden waters are the planet's subconscious, vast and ancient. They remember everything. The ages when glaciers ruled the land, the rise and fall of civilizations, the shifting of continents. When they finally emerge as springs, they carry with them the flavor of time. The same molecules that once flowed in a river may now emerge in a desert oasis, a mountain well, or the veins of an underground stream. In this rebirth, the river learns patience. It no longer rushes toward the sea. It seeps, gathers, nourishes, and becomes part of countless other stories. A leaf that drinks from rain becomes food for an animal. That animal's movement scatters seeds, which in turn grow into new forests that call more rain. The circle expands infinitely, no longer bound by a single current. The river's essence has diffused into everything that grows, breathes, or waits. It is no longer a singular voice but a chorus of existence. Its purpose is no longer to move forward, but to sustain the world through the quiet persistence of return. There is something deeply spiritual in this transformation. The way motion gives way to stillness, how the grand becomes intimate, and how giving becomes the purest form of continuation. Many traditions recognized this truth long before science did. In Taoist philosophy, water is the image of the way itself, humble, yielding, and yet unstoppable. It nourishes all without seeking recognition, flows to the lowest places, and by doing so, sustains everything. In the same way, the rain teaches humility through its descent. It falls freely, asking for nothing, knowing that its purpose is fulfilled the moment it touches the ground. If one could magnify a single droplet landing on a leaf, one would see an entire universe inside it. The surface tension forms a perfect sphere, bending light into miniature rainbows. Within it, microscopic particles float, bits of dust, pollen, bacteria, salt, each a seed of connection. When the droplet breaks, those particles scatter, carried by wind, insects, or gravity to places unknown. That one droplet, insignificant in itself, becomes the origin of infinite change. The river that once carved canyons now nourishes a sapling, or feeds a flower blooming on a cliff, or cools the brow of an animal at dusk. The grandeur of flow has become the intimacy of touch. As the day passes, the warmth of sunlight draws some of the water back toward the air. The cycle continues, but slower now, more deliberate. The land breathes, exhaling mist that rises toward the sky. What was once rain becomes vapor again, continuing its endless pilgrimage between heaven and earth. The rhythm is soft, ancient, unbroken, a quiet pulse beneath all things. The earth, through this breathing, remembers itself. It holds no fear of repetition, because repetition is not stagnation, it is refinement. Each cycle carries with it the echoes of the last, shaping the future through the memory of flow. In this endless movement, there lies a quiet teaching for human life. The river's return to rain reminds us that purpose is not found in permanence but in participation. We are meant to move through the world as water does, freely, giving, dissolving boundaries. We nourish others not by holding, but by flowing through. Our actions, like droplets, may seem small, yet each carries the potential to shape landscapes of thought and emotion far beyond our sight. To live like water is to remember that even in stillness, one continues to give, even in dissolution, one remains whole. When night falls again, the land cools. The last of the rain glistens on leaves, reflecting the pale glow of the moon. The world is quiet, washed clean. Somewhere, beneath the soil, the first trickles of a newborn stream begin to gather. The sound is faint, a whisper of beginnings repeating themselves. The river is coming back, though it has never truly been gone. In every root, in every cloud, in every breath of mist, it remembers the path it once took and the ocean that waits for it still. The cycle has no end, only continuity, the eternal remembering of the earth through the motion of its waters. Somewhere deep within the quiet heart of the forest, a single droplet slides down the curve of a leaf and falls into a hollowed stone. The sound it makes is small, almost nothing, but within it lies the weight of eternity. The droplet joins others, filling the stone's basin until it overflows and spills into a thin, shimmering thread that winds through roots and soil. Thus, a new river begins, not with thunder or grandeur, but with patience. It begins as a repetition, yet it is never the same. Each new current carries traces of those before it, minerals, memories, and the quiet hum of transformation. The earth breathes it into being as it has countless times before, a gentle reassertion of continuity. In the cool dawn light, the young stream gleams like polished glass. It curves around moss-covered rocks, murmuring softly, uncertain yet determined. The land cradles it, shaping its early journey. Birds come to drink. Ferns lean in to feel the mist. A deer lowers its head, trusting the water as if recognizing an old friend. There is tenderness in these beginnings, a subtle awareness that everything alive depends on this newborn motion. The world seems to lean closer, listening to the faint song of its own pulse restarting. Science tells us that rivers rarely follow their old courses exactly. The land shifts, tectonic plates move, glaciers carve new scars, and the soil forgets its former grooves. Yet, water always finds its way, seeking the lowest places, following gravity's quiet guidance. The young river, though unaware, is an artist redrawing the face of the planet. It carries sediment that will become future valleys, future deltas, and future worlds. It is both sculptor and pilgrim, shaping and remembering at once. What once was ocean rain becomes mountain song, flowing again through the endless exchange of the elements. This renewal reflects a truth of the cosmos itself. Creation is never static. Everything in the universe, from galaxies to living beings, exists in cycles of birth, dissolution, and rebirth. Stars collapse into dust, and from that dust, new stars ignite. Water, too, obeys this cosmic law. Its molecules may wander for centuries through stone, air, and blood, yet they always return to movement. The river's rebirth is therefore not just an earthly act. It is a small echo of the universe remembering how to begin again. For humanity, this renewal holds a mirror. We too forget our sources. We move through years, tasks, and identities, often mistaking motion for purpose. But the river's quiet reappearance reminds us that returning is not regression, it is evolution. The river does not flow backward into the past, it flows forward into remembrance. It carries forward what was once forgotten, blending memory with discovery. Every bend, every ripple, every shift in light across its surface speaks of learning, the kind of wisdom that comes only from returning again and again to the beginning, with new understanding each time. In ancient philosophy, the concept of eternal recurrence appears in many forms. The Stoics saw it as the cosmos endlessly repeating itself in cycles of fire and renewal. Hindu cosmology speaks of the yugas, ages that rise and dissolve in rhythmic harmony. Even modern science recognizes the cyclical nature of existence, from orbital mechanics to ecological systems. The reborn river, therefore, is not just a natural event. It is a metaphor for the resilience of being. Life persists because it remembers how to repeat without sameness, how to flow again, but differently. The newborn current moves with innocence, yet beneath its shimmer lies the deep intelligence of pattern. Within each droplet, the laws of physics and chemistry, temperature, density, cohesion, work in silent unison. Each ripple reflects sunlight at an angle precise enough to refract a spectrum. Each meander follows mathematical ratios that mirror the growth of trees and the spirals of galaxies. The river's motion is not random. It is geometry in motion, an expression of the same symmetry that binds atoms and stars. Through its flow, the river reveals the quiet language of the universe, an alphabet written in water, always spelling the word return. And yet, there is something deeply emotional about this repetition. To watch a new river being born is to feel time folding in on itself. You can sense the ancient river that once carved this valley, hear its echoes in the stones. The water glimmers as if lit from within, carrying the memory of starlight it once reflected upon the ocean's surface. There is no separation between past and present, only layers of remembering. Perhaps this is what makes the sight of flowing waters so hypnotic to the human mind. It reminds us of the continuity we've always been part of, the motion that connects birth and death, self and world. At night, the young river glows under the moon, tracing silver veins through the dark earth. It moves slowly, deliberately, without rush. Fireflies drift above it, tiny constellations mirroring the heavens. The air smells of damp soil and beginnings. There is peace in this quiet persistence, a sense that the world, though ancient and wounded, still knows how to start again. The river's soft song fills the space between silence and sound, between memory and forgetting. It is the earth's lullaby to itself. Perhaps, if consciousness could speak through nature, it would sound like this river, endlessly learning how to be new, endlessly remembering how to flow. Every cycle of return, every drop that falls, every current that forms, carries the same message in infinite variations. Nothing is ever lost, only transformed. The river that begins anew is proof that life is a rhythm, not a line. It is a reminder that time is not a road leading away from the past, but a circle drawing us back to the source again and again, each return deeper, wiser, more whole. And so, the reborn stream moves forward into the dawn, gathering light, breath, and sound. Its journey has just begun, yet it carries all of eternity within it. Somewhere ahead lies the sea, waiting with open arms, ready once more to receive what it has always known. The story continues, not as repetition, but as the eternal unfolding of the same truth, that every river, in seeking its ocean, is only trying to remember where it began. As the young river winds through the valley, its voice deepens. What was once a whisper has grown into a song, still soft, but confident, aware of its own rhythm. It curves through forests that have known countless generations of flow, brushing against roots that remember ancient rains. Around it, the world has changed. Mountains have shifted, animals have evolved, civilizations have risen and fallen, but the river remains, adapting without resistance. It does not fight the landscape, it learns its shape, tracing the contours of the possible. In that quiet adaptation lies wisdom, the kind that does not declare itself, but endures. The land through which it moves is a vast library of memory. Sediments carried from faraway peaks rest in layers of time, each one holding stories written in grains of sand. Geologists call them strata, but they are really the Earth's journals, pages of stone recording floods, droughts, ice ages, and blooms of life. As the river cuts through these layers, it reads its own history carved into the walls of its canyon. Here lies the memory of its former course, there, the mark of an ancient shore. Every twist in the water mirrors a lesson in impermanence. The river flows through its own archive, never pausing to mourn what was, yet never forgetting. There is a deep poetry in the way erosion and creation coexist. The river carves and deposits, destroys and rebuilds. The soil it removes from one place becomes the foundation of another. Even in its most violent moments, when floods rise, when banks collapse, the destruction is only temporary, part of a greater pattern of renewal. Science explains this as sediment transport, a process of dynamic equilibrium. But the river itself seems to move with intention, balancing loss with offering. It teaches that creation does not require permanence, it only requires motion. At dawn, mist rises from its surface like breath. Light filters through it in shifting golds and silvers, creating fleeting bridges between water and sky. For a few moments, it feels as though the earth itself is exhaling dreams. Within this stillness, the river's surface reflects the canopy above, the trembling of leaves, the flight of birds, the scattered fragments of cloud. Everything appears twice, once in form, once in reflection. The boundary between real and mirrored blurs, as if the river were both observer and participant, recording the world even as it carries it forward. This duality of movement and stillness, reflection and passage, is central to all things alive. The river's flow is not constant. It pulses, changes, rests. In drought, it contracts and hides within the stones. In flood, it expands beyond its banks, reclaiming forgotten plains. Its rhythm follows the seasons, the pull of the moon, the tilt of the planet. And through this rhythm, it remains in harmony with forces far beyond itself. The river teaches that balance is not stasis, it is conversation. It listens to gravity, to temperature, to the whisper of wind. Its equilibrium is dynamic, alive, responsive. Philosophically, this stage of the river's journey mirrors maturity, the phase in which a being learns to carry both memory and motion gracefully. It no longer rushes blindly toward the ocean, nor clings to the mountains behind. It has found its pace, its knowing. Like consciousness growing into awareness, the river now understands that it is part of a network larger than itself. It feeds lakes, seeps into groundwater, nourishes crops, shapes weather patterns. What it does here affects what happens thousands of miles away. Its identity has expanded from a singular stream into a system, an invisible communion of cause and effect. And within this realization lies humility. The river does not choose where it flows, it yields to terrain. Yet in that surrender lies its power. Through patience, it sculpts continents. Through yielding, it becomes unstoppable. The Taoist masters saw in water the purest model of wisdom. It bends without breaking, descends without shame, gives without demand. Its softness wears down stone, its persistence shapes the world. The mature river embodies this truth completely, that strength and gentleness are not opposites but reflections of one another. At dusk, as the light fades, the river catches the last color of the sky. It glows with a quiet luminescence, silver turning to violet. Crickets begin their song, and the world slows into evening. Along the banks, the air grows cooler, filled with the smell of wet earth and distant rain. The water's surface smooths, and the current flows like a thought at rest. Here, in this tranquil hour, the river becomes a mirror for the mind itself, a living metaphor for awareness. Thoughts, like ripples, arise and dissolve. Reflections come and go. Beneath them, the flow continues, untouched. Somewhere downstream, the river's sound deepens again. It begins to sense the widening of space, the faint pull of the sea calling it home. Yet there is no urgency, no longing, only readiness. It has learned enough to move without fear of loss. The ocean is not a place to escape to, but a rhythm to rejoin. Each bend now feels like a memory returning, each wave a rehearsal for reunion. The river carries within it every landscape it has touched, the scent of pine, the taste of stone, the glint of starlight on mountain snow. It has become a traveler who has finally understood that every journey leads inward, toward remembrance. Night falls fully. The river darkens into a ribbon of sound, invisible but present. Overhead, constellations shimmer on its surface, trembling with each small current. The stars above and the stars reflected seem to gaze at each other across an endless distance, and yet they are one. The cosmos, it seems, is watching itself through water. In this union of reflection and reality, the universe remembers its own shape, fluid, cyclical, awake. The river moves quietly through the dark, carrying the memory of mountains and the dream of the sea. In every drop, the same truth flows, that all journeys, no matter how far they roam, are only the long way home. The sea receives the river without judgment. After its long pilgrimage through forest and field, through drought and flood, the river arrives not as a stranger but as something the ocean has always known. The first meeting is silent. The salt and the fresh touch tentatively, like old friends reuniting after centuries apart. There is no ceremony, no applause, only the soft mingling of waters, a surrender so complete it feels sacred. The river does not resist this merging. It dissolves. It becomes part of something vaster, losing its name, its form, and yet, gaining everything. In that vanishing lies the deepest lesson of all, that to complete oneself is to let go of oneself. At the estuary, where the tide breathes in and out, the air is thick with life. Here, in the threshold between two worlds, the rules of both dissolve. Freshwater fish mingle with creatures of the deep, reeds bend with the rhythm of the tide, and birds wheel in spirals of effortless grace. Science calls this a zone of transition, a place of nutrient exchange, of balance between salinity and flow. But to the contemplative mind, it is something more, the embodiment of impermanence. Every moment here is transformation. The boundary is never fixed. It shifts with each tide, each gust of wind, each phase of the moon. The river does not end here. It becomes process, endless and alive. The ocean's vastness dwarfs everything that enters it. Beneath its surface lies a silence so immense that even thought seems to fade. The light descends in slow gradients of blue until it disappears into blackness. And yet, within that darkness, there is no void. There are whispers of motion, of unseen life pulsing in slow rhythms. The ocean is not empty, it is full of becoming. The river's minerals disperse, feeding coral, plankton, kelp. Its freshwater threads through currents, rising again as vapor, beginning the long climb back to the clouds. The cycle continues, not as repetition, but as evolution. What dissolves here returns elsewhere, transfigured. Philosophically, this is the soul's ocean. The moment when individuality dissolves into the universal, when identity becomes part of the infinite continuity of being. Mystics have tried to describe this, the merging with the divine, the stillness beyond thought, the recognition that there was never separation to begin with. Science, in its language, echoes the same truth through the law of conservation, that nothing is truly lost, only changed in form. The river and the sea are one expression of that eternal principle, transformation without annihilation. As waves rise and fall, the sound carries a strange familiarity. It is not unlike the heartbeat that echoed in the womb, or the slow rhythm of breath in sleep. Perhaps that is why the ocean soothes us. It mirrors the pulse of origins. The same water that now laps against the shore once fell as rain, once coursed through veins of roots, once flowed within the river's own body. It has traveled through time and life, carrying with it the memory of everything it has touched. When we stand at the edge of the sea, we are not merely observers, we are participants in that continuity. The salt on our skin is a reminder that we, too, belong to this cycle of return. At twilight, the boundary between water and sky disappears. The horizon dissolves, and the sea becomes a mirror of infinite color, rose, indigo, gold fading into gray. The waves move like breathing, endless and patient. Each one rises with purpose and falls without regret. In this rhythm is acceptance, the understanding that nothing truly ends, only changes its expression. The river's story has not concluded, it has expanded beyond narration. It has entered the collective rhythm of existence itself, where beginning and ending are one continuous motion. Night comes. The moon lays a path of silver across the surface, and for a moment, it seems as though the river's spirit travels along it, ascending, luminous, unbound. The world is quiet except for the steady sigh of waves. In the dark, there is no distinction between sky and sea, between reflection and reality. Everything is folded into the same vastness. This is what the river sought without knowing it, not arrival, but dissolution, not completion, but continuation. The ocean does not claim the river, it welcomes it home. Far below, unseen currents move like thoughts beneath consciousness. They carry warmth, minerals, and memory across the planet, linking distant shores in silent dialogue. The water that once traced a mountain's face now touches coral in another hemisphere. What was once a drop in the stream is now part of the tide that shapes coastlines. The scale of connection is immeasurable. The same atoms that once belonged to a glacier, a forest, or a breath may one day rise again into the sky as rain. Nothing is lost. Everything circulates. The river's death is its rebirth in another form, another place, another rhythm. And so, the story circles back to where it began. The sky, the mountain, the rain. The vapor that will fall tomorrow carries within it a trace of the river that vanished today. The cycle repeats, not mechanically, but musically, a symphony of transformation. Every drop knows where it has been and where it will go. Time itself seems to flow in this pattern, spiraling endlessly between creation and release. In the end, the lesson is simple but profound. The river's journey was never about reaching the sea, it was about learning how to become it. Every obstacle, every curve, every loss led it closer to understanding that letting go is not disappearance, it is union. The ocean does not erase the river's story, it absorbs it, amplifies it, carries it forward in wave, mist, and rain. The journey is eternal, and in that eternity lies peace. As the dawn begins again somewhere far away, a cloud gathers. Within it, a single drop forms, new, yet ancient, holding within it the memory of mountains and oceans alike. It trembles for a moment, luminous in the morning light, before falling. The cycle begins anew. The story continues.